Today, a landmark loss for big tech in the European Union.
Given the precedent-setting nature of GDPR, is the US next?
Then, Russian hacking and Microsoft bribes.
I'm Laura Fitton. This is Future Forward.
I am Steven Rosenbaum. Let us launch. You know, this is going to be a great pod. If you listen to no other podcast this week, this is the one to listen to. I am convinced of that. We have really good stories to talk about, and spring is in the air. It's possible we won't have winter for the rest of our lives, which would be very nice.
Don't jinx it.
But wait. I have a great personal story to tell you. How important do you think local news is?
I think it's pretty important.
So I have a personal local news story. You know, whenever people talk about local news, they say school lunch menus and city council meetings are. So some local news feed the other day, I have to check which one it was. It might have been Patch. It might have been My Upper West. Had an article about all the best bagel bakeries in New York. And they listed...
That's important information. I want that article.
They listed the very best gluten-free bagel in New York. And it turns out this gluten-free bagel is a block and a half from my house.
Your life changed.
My life
Your
changed.
life straight up changed. Was that this week?
Yes.
Amazing. Congratulations. Mazel tov. That's
so what's weird is it's a block. I've walked by this place maybe 2,000 times. It's never occurred to me to go in for a moment. And it took a local news operation highlighting a non-breaking, not about the world coming to an end, but just about bagels, to say to me, hey, this place down the block from you is yummy and delicious. And by the way, happens to be gluten-free, which I am. So I have sampled.
I have to say, the rest of us who don't live in New York City, to us, local news means, the people who talk to only our city. You mean like local, like Patch and stuff like that. That is amazing.
I mean, a block and a half. So I'm thinking about writing a blog post about like the personal impact of, because people think news is only anyway. So with that,
right.
We zoom way back out and we talk about what's going on in Europe and why I think it's incredibly important. I'm obviously not talking about what's going on in Ukraine because that is unbelievably difficult and important, but I think probably not in today's podcast. So let's just start with this New York Times piece. EU takes aim at big tech's power with landmark digital act. I guess I don't understand how the EU is so much more agile in being able to legislate technology than the US is.
I mean, I think there's a pretty big cultural difference in expectation of privacy, and that this has been building for a long time. But I don't know. Maybe they're more of like mind. That's a great question.
Yeah. They've also, lived through the impact, if you think about, going back to Nazi Germany, however you feel about Brexit, it's, Cambridge Analytica, which has an impact, it's pretty clear that they seem to have a more on the ground understanding of what this runaway train is. And they don't wave around the First Amendment nearly as much as we do. Right. They don't have they don't have
it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so for listeners who have not been following the story, and you're forgiven if you haven't, because there's been a lot else going on. They agreed on I'll just read you a little bit from the Times. The European Union agreed on Thursday to one of the world's most far-reaching laws to address the power of the biggest tech companies, potentially reshaping app stores, online advertising, e-commerce, messaging services, and every other digital tool. The law, called the Digital Marketers Act, is the most sweeping piece of digital policy since the bloc put the world's toughest rules to protect people's online data into effect in 2018. And, all of the big tech companies are pushing back mightily on this. but I wonder, you know, I get the sense that you can't lobby the EU with the economic efficiency that the US can. You know, you just can't come in and, you know, buy a
By a
senator.
couple senators.
Yeah. Joe Manchin coming to mind almost immediately. Um, we but we should do that. We should start like a GoFundMe to see if we can raise more money to buy him back. Just like open up a donation window.
Yeah, because
Um,
you gotta cover not just the lobbyist, but all his own personal holdings and familial investments. I thought you said this isn't a politics podcast, Steve.
oh, sorry, my bad. I know I just leak into politics, but I will try and but
I mean,
here's why
it's
I think this story is hugely important for the tech world that we live in. Um, if you look back to GDPR, um, one of the things, if you're Google, for example, you can't really say, "Oh, there's a law in the European Union. We'll have to splinter our code base and have
right.
it behave one way in a geo-fenced European world and in another way in the US." And so GDPR, even though it came from Europe, essentially became the law of the land in the US.
It did. I was at HubSpot at the time, and it had huge impacts over almost everything our software does. So when you mentioned, most people aren't even aware of GDPR, it seems strange to me because for months in the lead up to it, we were discussing, what to rebuild to make it compliant, what we would have to tell customers, because, some of the things are like, hey, that email list you have, if you're not using it and keeping it active, it's just going to completely expire and you won't be able to use it. I told that to a startup I was talking to the other day, and they were frankly kind of shocked. They had no idea they couldn't just collect emails for 3 years and send out to them someday. So, I mean, I don't think it's horrible. I do think things are a little out of control. It'll be interesting to see what these tech companies do about it, though, because yeah, you can't strain the ocean.
You can't strain the ocean. Are there two spellings of the word strain? I think maybe.
Well,
I,
and as soon as I said that, I remembered all the oceanography research I've done at one point in my career when I was a cook on an oceanographic vessel, and we strain the ocean all the time. But you know what I mean. You can't separate.
so here's market watches. By the way, we put all these links in the show notes as well. So don't feel the need, if you're listening, to kind of be Googling. If you don't know this story, we've done your homework for you. So this is Market Watch opinion, and the headline is: Europeans' new big tech law could actually produce results like iMessage and Facebook Messenger playing nicely and big money fines. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, Facebook Messenger and iMessage hate each other and make my life miserable.
Yeah, as much as I want to be like, oh, tech innovation. Yeah. I mean, I think tech has been showing for a long time that it needs to be reined in a little bit. There have been some pretty horrible, horrible things done on the platforms that these companies built, even when they meant the platforms to be completely innocuous. So yeah, this really doesn't bother me.
So one of the things I think people forget about big tech companies is that, on one hand, philosophically, they can say we want to play nice or whatever. But when you get down into the weeds of any of these businesses, and you know this from HubSpot, there are metrics you have to hit, and your manager is looking at your metrics and saying, are we growing? Did we do more dollars? Did we do more membership? Did we grow our, and if you're trying to put your feed your kids or pay your mortgage or whatever it is you're trying to do, like, not hitting your numbers is going to endanger your job. I mean, I had a tech support issue with Facebook the other day, and ended up on a very nice chat and then a phone call with an uh, ad concierge support person who,
Wow.
yeah,
That's like a
who
unicorn. A phone
yeah,
call with
yeah,
Facebook? What?
call from Palo Alto. Um, and when she was done, I got this fairly innocuous set of questions I was supposed to answer. And I just flashed back to the movie The Circle, the book The Circle, and then the movie The Circle, and realized that, like, every time any of these companies asks you to rank how well your support was, what they're doing is looking for the 20% lowest response of a support person to fire them. Like that's what they're using your input to aggregate and then say, look, operator number 74321 continues to get bad marks. We need to recycle that job and put somebody new in that job, which, depending on how you feel about that, on one hand, you should just give everybody a 10 so they don't get fired.
I do tend towards that. I mean, if there's something like really awful about the company, I will try and put that in the comment. But yeah, the numbers of the individual rep, those are sacred.
Right.
We'll be
But
bullying
it's
otherwise.
also 5 minutes of your day. And I probably get 4 of those a day.
Yeah.
So, that's, 20 minutes of your day going 9, 9, 9, 9, whatever. Anyway, I'm excited by this change because I don't think we realize as a community how much advertising. I mean, it used to be back in the television days that General Foods would never put its ad on a program they found objectionable.
Right.
They wouldn't put their ad on Breitbart. But somehow the web and ad networks have made it a little hazier. Like, well, we put our ads into these networks and then they pop up a bunch of places, but they're so granular, we really can't tell where they are. And we don't want to be on a bad place. But, the algorithm did it, not our fault. So the shift toward more accountability and more consumer control over their private information, I think, we should almost throw a party to celebrate that.
It's really interesting. I can't go deep on, human rights law across Europe versus US, but on the surface, there are a couple laws I'm familiar with over there that just seem so much more oriented around protecting individual rights, which is supposed to be what America's all about, right? But when you look at employment law in the EU, it is really strict and it is really about protecting the individual employee and protecting their quality of life, protecting their rights. I know a lot of companies find it very offensive when they first get over there and look at these laws, but that taken together with protection of individuals' privacy and data and interoperability, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah,
I
I do
think we,
too.
rugged individualism sort of went the opposite way of like, we're not going to protect you at all. We're just going to throw you to the wolves and let the companies run roughshod. We have crazy things like Citizens United, right? Where a company is a person. And so, yeah, I have nothing to add. I think this was really
Let
good
me
and
just add one
interesting.
more little chunk of this Times article because I think they do a really good job on this. It's a quote. Faced with big online platforms behaving like they were too big to care, Europe has put its foot down, said Terry Breton, one of the top digital officials at the European Commission. We are putting an end to the so-called Wild West dominating our information space, a new framework that can become a reference for democracies around the world. No joke. Not playing. They know the tools they're operating with.
And they have the dollars to vote with. So, well, not dollars, euros, but you know what I mean.
It isn't clear to me. I'm looking here. Oh, here we go. Apple and Google, which make operating systems that run nearly every smartphone, would be required to loosen their grip. Apple would have to allow alternatives to its App Store for downloading apps, a change the company has warned could harm security. The law would also let companies such as Spotify and Epic Games use payment methods other than Apple's App Store, which charges a 30% commission. This is huge.
Yeah, and they're right. It will impact security, but they've been using that excuse to extort their 30% off of everything for way too long.
Have you ever built an app for the iPhone?
Yes.
I just
when we
remember
had an iPhone version.
I just remember dealing. The thing no one wants to say out loud about dealing with Apple when you're a developer is, I'm like, it's incredibly difficult. Like, there's a reason why Android's kind of a hot mess, and the App Store is this clean. Every little chiclet looks the same, and they're all the same shape, and they have the same rounded corners. And that's because Apple's just like, until it meets our brand promise, doesn't get on the store. And as a user, I like that. And as a developer, not so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a push pull, right? Because there's the security question. There's just plain the performance question. If someone installs an app that, makes their phone performance terrible, they're not going, oh, that weird developer messed up my phone performance. They're going, Apple sucks. So I get it. But like anything, there's a creative tension there. And I do think monopolies tend to be a little toxic.
That may be the tweet of this podcast.
Little
Pistachio
bit.
says monopolies toxic. Yes, agreed. All right, so let's move for a minute to this interesting story about Twitter. So the hearings for our new Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson were horrifying and amazing at the same time.
And can I add a third adjective?
Sure.
Super familiar.
All
the Black women in my world and the ones I follow as leaders were like, I wish I could say this is outrageous and unusual. We have to be stoic. We have other people's, crap projected on us. We have to be held to such a higher standard. Like it was that's the word I kept hearing all week. This is familiar. This is relatable. We have all been through this. And that broke my heart because it seems outrageous when we look at it, right?
So this is maybe the wrong word to use, and you could slap my hand if it sounds paternalistic, but I was just so proud of her. I just like I want her to be my city councilwoman. I want her to be my mayor. I want her to be, the person on my school board. I want there to be 150,000 of her. Just so knowledgeable and unflappable and responsive and not defensive, and just what an extraordinary career. And I mean, she's the American dream. She's what we all want to believe this country is, which is, somebody who can, literally build a life, everything, her daughters, her husband, the whole, flawless, both intellectually and personally.
And flawless because she had to be. There's just no margin granted. There's no, you have to be beyond flawless. Anyway, that's a whole sidebar. But yeah, so you have all these people coming in, basically using it as a studio to record outrageous sound bites that they can use in their next campaign speech and to get on Fox News saying horrible things and to very much manipulate connections with things she's not even connected to that aren't even her responsibility.
So here's a sidebar, but it's not. So if you think about what's going on with Facebook, Twitter has gone through a fascinating evolution as a company and become, I don't even know exactly what it is, but seems to be succeeding, with some notable exceptions, to be kind of the town square, and conversation, lots of information, lots of, still some scary, creepy stuff. But the fact that Ted Cruz essentially grandstanded this horrible, quote unquote, they call, the week calls it a dust up, but I don't know that I would call it a dust up. I mean, he just did kind of evil performance, and then literally
stormed out, right?
What?
And then stormed out, right?
Then picked up his phone to read Twitter to see what the feedback was.
Yeah. Forget I did it all for the gram. I mean, these people are, I don't have the right words for it.
I find that fascinating on so many levels. I mean, I guess if you're in Congress, you come in the morning and you ask your intern how many calls we got overnight about either positive or negative about whatever. But, calling Congress to register your pleasure or displeasure is a real effort. Like, you have to dial the phone, and I'm a fairly outspoken person, and I find that anxiety producing. But the fact that Ted Cruz now believes that he can get kind of a snap poll of his performance from Twitter, to me is fascinating. And
yeah, it's real time intel.
All right, let's move on. We have a couple of other things we want to cover. Let's talk about this Microsoft thing.
Yeah. Wow. Microsoft. Hello.
I might be. How do I say this? The world. I'm going to get myself in trouble. That's why I'm pausing. I mean, the world operates on bribes. I mean, there are people for whom $20 tucked into their hand gets you a better seat at a restaurant. It gets your whatever issues you have with your building repaired quicker. Like, they're I don't know. I presume that Microsoft, if they could answer the question honestly, would say there are parts of the world in which this is the coin of the realm, and to get the business done, we need to get done. We need to hand somebody a bag of money. And I knew someone in New York, I won't say their name, high profile person who literally said part of his job was carrying around brown paper bag, lunch bags full of cash to get certain kinds of deals done. And, I'd like to think that you and I are both above being bribed. But, if someone came to us and said, here's $100, can your podcast next week be about XYZ? We would say no. And if they said, here's $10,000, we would say no. And if they said, here's $150,000, we would say no, right? I mean,
or sell the ad and disclose it, right?
I'm just saying there is a number at which,
it gets
people
harder.
Yeah. So I'm not sure I'm defending Microsoft, but I'm not sure that I find this terribly surprising. And here, so this is from The Verge, and it's a whistleblower essentially saying, hey, I'll just read you the first paragraph. In 2016, Yasser Alaban noticed a $40,000 payment to a client in Africa that didn't smell right. The payment came from Microsoft's business investment fund. The money meant for closing deals and opening up new lines of business, but the customer named in the request wasn't a customer at all, at least not according to the internal client list. He was a former Microsoft employee who'd been terminated for poor performance, and he'd left the company so recently that its rules would have barred him from approval. It was suspicious, more like a bribe than a business request. I guess I'm not sure what is going to come of this. 2016 is a long time ago.
Right. I do think I mean, again, I remember living in Moscow in 94, 95, and there'd be all these expats starting businesses and, everything on the surface. I go through life in a very naive state of like, oh, yes, this is all real and this is all true. And, the fact was you couldn't be operating a business in that city in that year unless you were paying bribes left, right, and center. And, when entrepreneurs started blowing up in car bombs, that kind of thing hit home. I mean, my friends even taught me, not that I was driving, but they're like, if you ever get pulled over by the police, play dumb. And instead of being like, Yani Pani Mayu, I don't understand, go for Yani Pani Delnik, right? And then they'll be like, oh, she's so stupid and doesn't speak Russian. There's no way I'm going to succeed in getting a bribe off her because she doesn't even understand me. Basically, you say, I'm not Monday, and try to sound like you're saying I don't understand. So yeah, it's like water in certain cultures. And
wow, that's great. You have
I don't
to
have
sound
a good answer
stupid.
for this.
I have trouble imagining you pulling off sounding stupid.
Well, I also didn't drive, so but the guy could grab you off public transit. They could, there was some kind of thing when I was leaving at Sheremetyevo with my cat, where my friend's driver who had taken me to the airport had to come in and pay a bribe to get the cat onto the plane. And, it was all very unclear to me what was going on. But yeah, I don't know.
There's a cat bribe. That's funny.
Personally, I think I probably had the vet papers a little wrong. I don't think it was entirely their fault, but let's say the vet papers being a little bit wrong was fixable with some money.
So this next, politics and tech and essentially what's going on with law is the story from the Times. U.S. accuses 4 Russian hackers of hacking infrastructure, including a nuclear plant.
When stuff is controlled by software, and software is hackable, stuff becomes hackable. And it's very scary to think about.
So a number of years ago, I was producing a story and ended up in a nuclear power plant with a camera crew, walking by the pool, the rods that were in the clean water pool. And if you've never been inside a nuclear power plant, at least when I was last in one, but I don't think they've changed much. The people wandering around inside mostly looked like plumbers. They were carrying great big wrenches and they had tool belts, and the bulk of what they were doing was plumbing.
Right. Making sure the water did what it needed to do.
Yes. And the control room, which I have a picture of somewhere, was pretty manual. So you can imagine the transition to digital, if the culture isn't a security culture, being pretty hackable. Now, the question is, if you get the keys to a nuclear power plant, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to shut it down and have electricity go dark in, Stamford, Connecticut, or do you want to blow it up? I mean, those are, but the story by Katie Benner is chilling.
Yeah.
And, there is in the air around what's going on in Ukraine, this sense that, Putin has a button he can push for any number of digital attacks on the U.S.
In fact, did you do the Chrome update yet? Because overnight it broke that there's a very high urgency Chrome update.
I did, and I don't remember why. It just
someone DM'd it to me overnight, so I woke up this morning. I don't think I've updated my laptop yet, but I did update my phone right away. No, it's scary. I mean, Steve, do you remember that crazy Columbia Gas situation here in Massachusetts? Did that story make it through? I hope this wasn't a hack. No one's ever really written about it or talked about it that I've seen. The story was, someone at Columbia Gas got a setting wrong. Oops. But I'm like, all those settings are controlled by software. Not to, be the harbinger of doom and terrify people, but houses just started blowing up, right? The settings in the natural gas system were, supposedly by mistake by somebody in the company set wrong. And it just simply caused houses to start blowing up. It was the scariest.
I always assume that's a meth lab.
No, it was multiple houses. And it was the gas pressure. So they literally, the town of Andover, our friend Rachel Happy was one of the houses affected. Hers didn't blow up, thank God. But these houses started blowing up and they had to like shut down the entire natural gas system for that geo and keep it shut for weeks. And then to turn on each individual house, they had to go in and replace every gas appliance in case it had been damaged in the pressure surge. It was a massive, massive snare. And I remember thinking at the time, like, oh my God, I wonder if this was a cyber attack, and no one wants to say that it was because
they never say. Yeah, I think the answer is yeah. I think the answer is always yes.
Or even if it wasn't, right? If I was the bad guy and I saw that story, I'd be like, great, how do we hack into everybody else's natural gas system? it is scary to think about when everything's controlled by bits. How are we protecting it?
We are out of time, so we're not going to get to talk about what the Senate's doing around tech, but there'll be plenty of time for that because it's not going anywhere. Have an excellent week and continue to kind of move forward, as it were.
Yeah. All right. Take care.